The house was already awake when Jonah arrived. He noticed it before the door, before the porch light that flickered like it was deciding whether to live. The house breathed, not metaphorically. The air around it moved in shallow, uneven pulls, like lungs working around a bruise. Cold slid out from the seams of the siding and wrapped around his ankles. Jonah told himself it was winter settling, wood contracting, his imagination overclocking from exhaustion. He had driven 7 hours through nothing to get here. He needed this place to be empty. He needed it to be dead. The key worked too easily. Inside, the air smelled old, but not dusty. It smelled used, like rooms that remembered hands and voices long after they were gone. The entryway light turned on when he flipped the switch, which annoyed him more than it reassured him. Electricity meant maintenance. Maintenance meant someone had been here recently. "Hello?" he said, because silence sometimes feels louder when you don't poke it. The house answered by settling. A soft, rolling sound moved through the walls, like a spine realigning. Jonah dropped his bag and shut the door. The click of the lock sounded final in a way locks usually don't. The hallway stretched forward, narrow and slightly crooked, as if the house had learned about straight lines from a picture and never quite grasped them. This was his grandmother's place, legally anyway. She had died 6 months earlier in a hospital that smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet resignation. No one else wanted the house. Too far out, too old, too many stories. Jonah hated stories. Stories made patterns. Patterns made expectations. Expectations made you miss what was actually happening. He walked in. The floorboards knew him. They didn't creak randomly. They responded. A step forward, a sigh beneath his foot. Pause, silence. Step back, a longer exhale, almost disappointed. He tested it, shifting his weight. The sound followed intention, not movement. "Stop," he said, softly. The house did not stop. It leaned into him, subtly, like a crowd does when it realizes you're going the wrong way. He moved faster, pushing down the hall into the living room. Furniture sat exactly as he remembered, which was wrong. His grandmother had been losing her grip near the end. She rearranged constantly, convinced the rooms were shrinking. But here everything was precise, curated to memory. The couch with its sunken left cushion, the lamp with the burn mark on the shade, the framed photo of Jonah at 8 years old, eyes half closed, mid-blink. He didn't remember that photo being there. He picked it up. The glass was warm. Behind him, the television turned on. Static hissed, then resolved into a picture, not a channel, a room, this room, from a corner near the ceiling, angled down. Jonah dropped the frame. On the screen, he watched himself turn, watched his own face drain of color. The delay was maybe half a second, but it was enough to feel wrong, enough to make his skin tighten like shrink wrap. The image zoomed slowly, not mechanically, curious, studying. "Okay," he said. His voice sounded small, as if the room had absorbed most of it before it could spread. The TV clicked off. The house relaxed. Jonah didn't sleep that night. He tried, on the couch, fully dressed, lights on, knife from the kitchen tucked into his waistband like that meant anything. Every time he closed his eyes, the house filled the space behind them. Not images, sensations, weight, attention, the feeling of being known down to the private thoughts you don't finish forming. At some point near dawn, he heard footsteps upstairs, measured, careful, too considerate to be random noise. His grandmother's bedroom was up there. He stood slowly. The footsteps stopped. Jonah waited. His heart did not slow. It synchronized. Thump, thump, thump. 3 beats, then a pause. The same rhythm came from above, through the ceiling. "No," he said. It wasn't a plea.
It was a boundary. The house tested it. One step, pause, another. Jonah moved to the stairs. Each step he took erased one from above, as if the house was adjusting, maintaining distance. At the landing, the hallway stretched longer than it should have. Doors lined it, too many, all closed. The bedroom door was at the end. Light leaked from beneath it, warm, yellow, domestic. Jonah's hand shook as he reached for the knob. The door opened before he touched it. His grandmother sat on the bed. She looked better than she had in years. Fuller face, clear eyes, no tremor in her hands as she smoothed the quilt. She smiled at him with practiced affection, the kind that comes from repetition, not feeling. "You came back," she said. Jonah swallowed. "You're dead." She nodded. "I know. That's not how this works. It works how the house needs it to." The walls pulsed once like a heartbeat. Jonah took a step back. The hallway behind him was shorter now. The stairs had retreated, curling away like something disturbed under a rock. "What do you want?" he asked. His grandmother tilted her head. "I don't want anything. The house does." "And what does the house want?" She smiled wider, skin stretching too tight at the corners of her mouth. "To stop being alone." The door slammed shut behind him. The room shifted. The walls drew closer, subtle but relentless. The ceiling lowered by inches. The bed lengthened, legs digging into the floor like roots. Jonah backed up until his calves hit the mattress. The quilt twitched. "You don't have to do this," he said, because humans are very good at bargaining with things that don't have choices. His grandmother stood. She was taller now, straighter. Her shadow did not match her movements. "I didn't," she said. "Neither did your mother, or her father. The house chooses. We stay because it remembers us. It remembers everyone." The walls whispered, names Jonah almost recognized, names he felt more than heard. The bed grabbed his legs. The quilt wrapped, heavy and damp, smelling of old sweat and antiseptic. Jonah screamed. The sound flattened, absorbed, fed back into the walls as a low hum of satisfaction. He slashed with the knife. Fabric tore. Something underneath bled, thick and dark, soaking through the sheaths. The house shuddered, startled. For a moment space loosened. Jonah ran. He burst through the door, down the hall that re-extended in panic, stairs slamming back into place just in time for him to take them, two at a time. The front door loomed, solid, real. He hit it hard. It opened onto the living room. The hallway behind him was gone. The house had folded inward. The TV turned on again. This time there was no static, just footage, decades of it, people entering, living, aging, slowing, being kept. Faces pressed close to the glass from inside the screen, mouths opening in silent instruction. Stay. The windows sealed, wood flowing over glass like skin healing. The door softened under Jonah's hands, grain blurring, handle sinking away. The house exhaled, long and content. Jonah felt it then, the truth settling into him like a second skeleton. The house wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was careful. It learned people. It mapped their habits, their weaknesses, the exact shape of their loneliness. It didn't trap everyone, only the ones who would eventually stop trying to leave. His knife clattered to the floor. The house waited. Hours passed, or days. Time thinned. Jonah found himself sitting on the couch staring at the blank TV. The photo of him at 8 years old rested on the table again, unbroken. He picked it up. The glass was warm. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps, lighter now, curious. Jonah stood, smoothing his clothes, already knowing where they would lead.
They found the town by accident. The map called it Briar Hollow, but the sign at the road's edge had lost enough letters that it simply read Briar Ho! The rest lay face down in the weeds, rusted screws like snapped bones. No one commented on it. They were already tired, already late, already irritated in that quiet way that makes bad decisions feel reasonable. The fog rolled in as they crossed the boundary. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't swirl or creep. It just existed, thick and dull, like breath held too long. Phones lost service at the same moment. The road narrowed into something that barely deserved the name. Houses appeared one by one, old wood structures leaning toward each other as if sharing secrets. No lights, no movement. The windows reflected nothing but fog and the car's own headlights, stretched and wrong. They passed a playground. The swings moved. There was no wind. "Someone still lives here," Mara said, forcing cheer into her voice. No one answered. The car rolled on, tires crunching over gravel that sounded too loud in the silence. At the center of town stood a church, or what had once been one. The steeple had collapsed inward, puncturing the roof like a spear. The bell lay on its side and the grass split cleanly in half. Painted on the church doors, flaking and uneven, were the words, "Do not stay after dark." They checked the time, 6:12 p.m. "It's fine," Ethan said. "Sun's still up." The fog thickened, dimming the sky into a flat gray that made time feel theoretical. They found the motel on the far edge of town. 1 story, 8 rooms. A vacancy sign flickered, buzzing softly like an insect trapped in glass. The office door stood open. Inside, the air smelled like dust and something sour underneath. A ledger lay open on the counter. Names filled the pages in careful handwriting, all different, all ending abruptly mid-line. The last entry was dated 15 years ago. A bell sat beside the ledger. Mara rang it. The sound echoed too long. Footsteps came from the back room, slow, dragging. A man emerged, thin as a coat rack, eyes cloudy and unfocused. He smiled with a mouth that didn't seem used to the shape. "You're late," Mara asked. "For what?" "For leaving." They exchanged looks. "How much for a room?" Ethan asked. The man named a price that was far too low. He slid a key across the counter. "Room 6. Don't go outside after dark," he added, as if remembering something mundane. "And if you hear knocking, don't answer." The door to room 6 stuck, then opened with a sound like tearing fabric. Inside, the furniture was intact but ancient. The bedspread smelled faintly of mildew. The bathroom mirror was stained in a way that suggested it had been wiped clean too many times. The window faced the woods. The trees stood unnaturally close, their branches interlaced like fingers. Night fell quickly, too quickly. At 7:03 p.m., the sky went black. Not dusk, not twilight, just black. The motel lights flickered, then steadied. Somewhere down the row, a door creaked open and closed. They sat on the bed, speaking in low voices, pretending not to listen to the silence pressing in around the room. At 7:19 p.m., the knocking started. Not at their door. At first. It came from the far end of the motel. 3 slow knocks, a pause, 3 more. Then closer. A door opened. A voice whispered something they couldn't hear. A wet sound followed, like hands clapping underwater. A scream cut off mid-breath. They didn't move. The knocking reached the door beside theirs, then the one on the other side. Each time the same pattern. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. Then footsteps dragged along the concrete outside room 6. The knocking stopped. A voice spoke from just beyond the door. "Mara," it said softly. Her blood went cold. No one else knew her name. "It's me," the voice continued. "I forgot my phone. Let me in." It sounded exactly like Ethan. Ethan was sitting beside her, pale, shaking, staring at the door. The handle twitched. Mara covered her mouth to keep from screaming. The voice sighed. "You always do this," it said, irritation bleeding through the imitation. "Just open the door." They stayed frozen as the voice slowly changed, pitch slipping, words stretching. "Open the door." The knocking resumed, harder now. Wood splintered, the hinges groaned. Then, abruptly, silence. Minutes passed, or hours. Time refused to behave. When the sun rose, it did so without color. A dull gray light seeped through the curtains. They left the room together. Every other door along the motel stood open. Every room was empty. No blood, no signs of struggle, just beds neatly made, personal items laid out as if waiting to be claimed. The office was empty, too. The ledger still lay open, but the last page had changed. 3 new names had been added. Their names, dated today. A note was written beneath them, the ink still wet. "Left after dark." They ran. The road out of town twisted in ways it hadn't before. Turns looped back on themselves. Landmarks repeated. The church appeared again and again. At the edge of the woods, they saw figures standing between the trees, too tall, too thin, faces smooth and unfinished, like mannequins left in the sun. They watched, learning. Mara stumbled. Ethan pulled her up. His grip was too tight. His hand felt wrong, cold, fingers bending in places fingers shouldn't. She looked at Ethan. His face was perfect, too perfect. "No," she whispered. He smiled. Behind him, the real Ethan lay on the road, eyes open, mouth frozen mid-scream. The thing wearing him tilted its head. "You left," it said gently. "You're not supposed to leave." The fog surged. Briar Hollow welcomed them back. The town is still there. It doesn't appear on maps anymore, but roads change when you're tired enough, when you're desperate enough, when you think stopping is safer than continuing. If you see a sign missing letters, keep driving. If someone knocks after dark, don't answer. And if a voice sounds exactly like someone
You again. Fine, let's open the door you definitely shouldn't open and walk straight into it. The last broadcast from Hollow Channel. When the emergency radio crackled to life, it was already too late for the town. No one noticed at first. Hollow Channel was the kind of place where things went unnoticed on purpose. One road in, one road out. Trees packed so tight they swallowed sound. Cell service died 5 miles back. The locals liked it that way. Silence felt safer, like if you didn't listen too closely, nothing bad could find you. At 2:17 a.m., every radio within town limits switched on by itself. Cars, kitchens, bedside alarm clocks from the 90s that hadn't worked in years, all of them hissed, then settled into a low, wet breathing sound. Not static, breathing. Then a voice. "This is an emergency transmission. If you can hear this, remain inside your home. Do not respond to voices outside. Do not answer the door. Do not look for missing persons." The message repeated once, then again, then it changed. Especially if they sound like someone you love. Evan Price heard the broadcast from the couch where he'd fallen asleep, boots still on, TV flickering some rerun he hadn't been watching. He sat up slowly, heart ticking too loud in his chest. The voice was calm, too calm, like someone reading safety instructions while the plane was already on fire. This message will now provide instructions for survival. A pause, long enough to feel intentional. First, turn off all lights. Evan didn't move. The radio breathed. Second, lock all doors and windows. Something thumped upstairs. Evan lived alone. He stood anyway, every instinct screaming at him to stay still. The floorboards groaned under his weight. The radio's breathing synced with his own for half a second, then drifted out of rhythm like it was correcting him. Upstairs, another sound, a drag, like fingernails across wood. Third, the radio continued, if you are not alone, do not assume the other person is human. Evan reached the staircase and froze. At the top step stood his sister. Lena had been dead for 3 years. She looked wrong, not rotted, not ghostly, just incomplete. Her eyes were open but unfocused, like she was listening to something behind Evan instead of looking at him. "Ev," she said softly, "why didn't you answer your phone?" His mouth refused to work. Behind him, the radio whispered, quieter now, like it didn't want her to hear. "Do not engage." Lena took 1 step forward, her foot bent strangely, heel touching wood at an angle that knees weren't meant to allow. "You left me," she said. Her voice cracked in the exact way it used to when she was upset. "It's cold where I am." Evan backed away until his shoulders hit the wall. "No," he whispered. Her head tilted, slowly, too far. "Why are you lying to me?" The lights flickered. The radio screamed, "Run!" He slammed the bedroom door and locked it, hands shaking so hard the key barely turned. Lena's footsteps stopped on the other side. Silence. Then knocking. Not fists, knuckles tapping politely. "Ev," she said, "open the door. You're scaring me." The radio, still clutched in his hand, whispered instructions, like a dying conscience. They mimic memory. They improve with exposure. Do not let them see you cry. The door handle twisted. Evan pressed his back against it, eyes burning. "How do I make it stop?" he hissed. The radio clicked. "You don't." Something sniffed at the crack beneath the door. Across town, similar scenes unfolded. Mrs. Calder's husband came back from the war with all his limbs intact this time. She let him in. The screaming stopped after 12 minutes. The Miller twins heard their mother calling from the crawl space, apologizing for the night she never came home. Only one twin answered. Sheriff Collins barricaded himself in the station. The voice on the radio switched halfway through the night. It started using his tone. By dawn, Hollow Channel had learned something important. Whatever was speaking through the radios wasn't warning them. It was documenting. At 5:44 a.m., the broadcast changed again. Phase 2 complete. Emotional replication accuracy now exceeds 92%. Evan hadn't slept. He sat on the bed, radio in his lap, door still shaking softly as Lena breathed on the other side. Her breathing didn't stop. It didn't need to. Phase 3 will begin shortly. Thank you for your cooperation. Evan stared at the window. Outside, the trees were moving, not swaying, turning. Their branches bent inward towards the houses, like fingers closing around something alive. The radio crackled one last time. "You were never meant to survive. You were meant to be convincing." The knocking stopped. Behind the door, Lena laughed. Not quite right, like she was practicing. Evan understood then. The real horror wasn't that something had come for them. It was that something had learned how to stay. And somewhere, far away, another town's radios were just beginning to turn on. Sleep well, or don't. Either way, it's listening.